Now, where we left off last time in the history of the NWO was Six had just joined, being named Six because he was the sixth member, not counting NWO Sting. And now, at the next pay-per-view, the Outsiders, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, win the WCW Tag Team Championships from Harlem Heat. Hogan successfully defends his world title. I don't remember from who. I looked this up like 4 times and I'm not remembering it for some reason. See how bad my brain is today. Yeah, Hogan defends his world title. Now, the only reason that Nash, Hall, and Hogan are recognized by WCW and allowed to wrestle WCW wrestlers are because they're champions. Anybody else in the NWO are not recognized as WCW workers. So the NWO has a special on Saturday night called NWO Saturday Night, where they wrestle local jobbers in an empty arena. Now, Roddy Piper comes to WCW demanding a match with Hogan because they're old nemesis, trying to put an end to the NWO. And the Giant wins the 60-man Battle Royal at World War III, earning a title shot. Now, according to the show, Roddy Piper is not yet signed on a contract with Eric Bischoff. And he was badgering Eric Bischoff into signing him to a contract so he can fight Hogan. And, of course, the NWO is beating up Piper. And the NWO comes out and beats up Piper, revealing that Eric Bischoff is, of course, a member of the NWO and has been the leader of the NWO the whole time. This leads to the Giant getting kicked out of the NWO because he refused to chokeslam Roddy Piper and demands his title shot. At the pay-per-view, I don't remember which one it is because I read a bunch of them and there's a bunch of information about this week's show. Roddy Piper defeats Hogan, with sleeper hold due to the Giant's interference. Nash and Hall lose to the Steiner brothers, but it's due to Nick Patrick being knocked down and referee Randy Anderson running in and doing the officiating. So next night on Nitro, Eric Bischoff fires Randy Anderson, rewards the title belts back to Nash and Hall, saying that since Anderson was not the official referee, the match ending doesn't count. And Piper and Hogan are going to have their championship match. In the meantime, Eric Bischoff declares that everybody in the WCW locker room has 30 days to turn their WCW contracts into NWO contracts. Marcus Bagwell immediately does, being redubbed Buff Bagwell. Mr. Wall Street is invited into the NWO by his former partner, Ted DiBiase. Masahiro Chono, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, joins the NWO, but primarily is the leader of NWO Japan in New Japan, which we're not getting into. And even more people start joining slowly, which we'll get into more of them later on. At the next pay-per-view, Hogan defeats Piper with interference from Macho Man, having Macho Man now join the NWO. Though he's been roving as a free agent with Sting. Nash and Hall lose their titles to Lex Luger and the Giant, though Bischoff once again reverses the decision, saying that Lex Luger was injured and not cleared to compete. So Lex Luger issues a challenge for a winner-take-all match. And something else happened, but I can't remember. I've read this like 8 times, and I can't remember it. It's really frustrating me right now. But a few days later on Nitro, Dr. Harvey Schiller, Turner vice president, comes in and relieves Eric Bischoff of his duties, claiming abuse of power. And the winner-take-all match is announced as a 3-way tag team match, which the NWO ends up winning, granting them a title match at their discretion sometime in the future. For any title sometime in the future. Now, at this point, Syxx is released from his contract and sent to rehab for alcoholism. Scott Hall is not on TV anymore because he is sent to rehab for alcoholism. Syxx is being released is I don't know what's wrong with me today. Leads to a segment on TV between Nash, Hogan, and Bischoff. And you start to see cracks between the NWO. And Sting comes down after the pay-per-view and attacks key members of the NWO in Nash, Hogan, Bischoff, and Savage. Like I said, Hall's off TV due to rehab for his alcoholism. There are a lot of alcoholics in wrestling. This leads to the Sting-Hogan match, but also leads to Bret Hart coming into WCW. Now, the NWO for weeks before Bret Hart came to WCW had said Bret Hart had already joined the NWO. Now, those of you who may not know, Bret Hart was originally planned to be the third man in the NWO, but he signed with WWF again instead of WCW. But when Bret Hart arrived in WCW, he said he wanted nothing to do with the NWO, but was the special referee between a match between Larry Zbyszko and Eric Bischoff for control of Nitro. If Bischoff wanted the NWO Nitro, and if Zbyszko wanted to say WCW Nitro. Bischoff's plan at this point was for NWO to control Nitro, and the newly debuted WCW Thunder on Thursday nights to become WCW's show, and he was going to have a rivalry there and a ratings war there between the NWO and WCW. So for a test run of this, he had the NWO come out one day and completely tear up the set on Nitro, destroy anything related to WCW, and take over the show. But ratings plummeted, and it was put on. It was canceled. Larry Zbyszko won the match, and WCW controlled Nitro still. Now, in the main event between Sting and Hogan, it was originally planned for referee Nick Patrick to make a fast count. Now, according to Sting, this match had many changing elements in it, because they were changing this match up until the match went on. I mean, it was probably always planned for Sting to win, But it was always changing how the ending was probably going to go, with them finally deciding Nick Patrick would make a fast count, and then Bret Hart, who was an official for that night, was to come out and restart the match, with Sting getting the victory. The problem is, Nick Patrick did not make a fast count. Nick Patrick made an honest-to-God 3 count, and then Bret Hart came and restarted the match, and it looked positively silly. So the next Thunder, on the debut episode of Thunder, J.J. Dillon came out and vacated the WCW title and declared a tournament for it. And newly commissioned Commissioner Roddy Piper, try saying that 5 times fast. Roddy Piper, who is the new commissioner of WCW, declared that Scott Hall, who had won a title shot at World War III, would get his title shot against the winner of another Sting versus Hogan match. It was not a tournament. It was another Sting versus Hogan match for the WCW title. Scott Hall would later lose that match. In the second Sting versus Hogan match, Sting would win thanks to interference from Macho Man Randy Savage, who said that he no longer needed Hogan and the NWO's help, leading to Hogan and Macho Man trying to one-up each other for several weeks, finally resulting in a cage match, which was a no contest. Now, this led to more dissension in the NWO. And there was dissension between Hogan and Nash because Nash was trying to, because Hogan didn't want Nash to get a title shot at Sting, because he didn't want to fight Sting. So he attacked Nash one day after a baseball bat on a pole match. So eventually, after it was Hogan and after Randy Savage won the title from Sting, Hogan the next night on Nitro wanted a match. It was Hogan versus Randy Savage in no DQ, no run-in match. And the Disciple, who was Ed Leslie, who you may know as Brutus Barber Beefcake, came in and took out Nick Patrick, the referee, and hit Randy Savage with his finisher, at which point Kevin Nash ran down, hit Hogan with his finisher, and put Savage on top of Hogan, at which point Bret Hart ran down, hit Nash with the belt, and put Hogan on top of Savage, giving Hogan the title. At this point, we're going to stop for this week, because this is the point where the NWO splits. And I will get into that next week, because I only want these videos to be about 10 minutes long, and we went over that. I was going to go to Goldberg, but I've got a bunch of stuff I want to add in on the NWO splitting. So next week we're going to get into the NWO splits, Goldberg, maybe the NWO coming back together. I don't know. I never know about how much I'm going to get into these videos. Next week we'll definitely get into the NWO splitting.